Who of you would like to earn 300 billions? Okay, kind of 6, 7 people. Yeah, this is kind of the some of the money we're talking about is in Germany. But on the other hand, if you listen to this event over here, then basically some people say before things get better, they have to get worse. So who of you wants to be healthy? Pretty much everyone. I'd say who of you would like to get 200 years old? No, one person only. Come on. Who of you would like to live forever? 2, 3, 4, 5. Shall we kill death? No? Why not? It's the only thing that works. The only thing that works. Well, let's discuss this later on. So certainly there's some companies working on this issue, the emperor or life and death, and there's a book entitled "Live Long Enough to Live Forever." But now, whom would you like to share your personal, intimate, and health data with? Would you like to share it with Secret Services? Nobody? With the military? Nobody? With your politicians? Nobody? With international corporations? 2, 3, okay. With your doctor? Not even that many. And two things we should really be controlling our data ourselves. Okay. Well, this is basically what my talk going to be about. Scientific and technological progress is not enough. I know you're doing great science, but if you want to live in a better future, we'll have to do more than that. We are living in a time of big data. A question, some people call it's the new oil, then what's the new motor? People say it's AI. It's basically running on that big data. And the question is, the dream, in a sense, can we now see what is wrong? Can we fix the system where it's broken with all that data? And so let's just start collecting that data, right? It's kind of only way of doing this is using your smartphone. Sorry, that was a bit fast. So there are lots of sensors in there, and in fact, for a long time, not only secret services, but also lots of corporations. Most of them you don't even know by name, have been collecting data about you without even telling you. Including well-known companies. So for some time, they were collecting health data, but we were not even aware that could be used as health data. And it was long before you were buying smartwatches in order to keep data, I think, consciously. So back in 2017 already, Google was experimenting with using the camera in your smartphone. Didn't tell us much about it. And suddenly, also 10 years ago, you were sometimes seeing all sorts of unasked health advisories, like, perhaps you want to get rid of your blackheads on your nose. So kind of, is your camera watching you, basically, and interfering with your own life? That's the question. This stuff has disappeared. We have now data protection laws, but it's back, basically, and still many people are concerned about the privacy. Who thinks we should still have a little bit of privacy or a little bit more? Who thinks we don't need privacy at all? Nobody, okay? But still, here is the news. A consortium of corporations wants the power over our most intimate data, and politics agrees. Why do they do that? And why have the United Nations and the World Economic Forum made this deal where they would basically share health data? Health data about you that you probably were not aware even existed. Well, there are many reasons given or excuses, money, data, oil power, knowledge power, safety for security reasons, sustainability, to improve the state of the world, and finally health to save and improve lives. And here you go, basically you're delivering lots of data to lots of companies, most of them you don't know, including also the Secret Service. And this is a quote from 2013. You're already a walking sensor platform. It is really very near within our grasp to be able to compute on all human-generated information, whatever that is. But I can tell you this, it's lots more than you'd ever think. Kind of probably 1,000 times more, perhaps 1,000,000 times more data than you think is being collected on. For example, about your voice. You don't even have to have your own smartphone with you for the Secret Service to find you through some microphone or smartphone nearby. But also companies are interested to figure out, what mood are you in? Did you drink a glass of wine too much yesterday? And these kind of things, which perhaps raise already your insurance fee. Um, and well, emotional AI will be really good at really looking into your thinking and emotions. Many years back already, there was a company that was offering services such as see anyone's personality. You could look up your neighbors, your colleagues, your enemies about their personality. And it was really detailed, much more detailed than this. So basically, you have been spied on, your personality is known by those companies. And it was just the beginning. Of course, now we have fingerprints, now we have DNA, and of course, companies are collecting this data, sometimes paying money for it, sometimes not. And the plan is basically to come up with healthcare clinics that work differently than before. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it really depends on how this is done, right? So the dream is we could now know everything, or very soon at least, and we'll be able to understand the human body, brain, and personality. The question is this true? But in any way, we're being carried on by dreams as, let's make lame people walk again, let's make blind people see again, and in fact, there's some astonishing success. I don't deny. And in any case, the data has been collected, the different data sets have been put together, and the idea was if we just had enough data, we would not even need scientific methods anymore. No theories, no scientists, and basically the AI would just do it by itself. Talking about your jobs, by the way, right? So if you don't agree, you should really say this out loud, because in the United States at the moment, university jobs are being cancelled to some extent, and it could be a lot more. And this is often also called the Kegel approach. So the question is, what could possibly go wrong? And in fact, I had the privilege to meet Jeremy Howard, who founded Kegel, and sit with him on the roof terrace of his company. At that time, we had a philosophical talk, and he explained me the big data approach of Kegel. He's a nice guy. And he said, you know what? We figured out, nobody expected this, that orange cars don't break down that much. And I'm a physicist by training, so that doesn't make any sense. The color should not change the stability of a car. So, somehow his famous example, I was questioning, I was not the only one. In fact, do you have any idea what could have been the reason? Well, number one, small numbers. There are not so many orange cars, kind of statistical fluctuations would explain it. But also, people who have an orange car maybe are so proud of it, they would not even use it very often, right? So how should it break down? Anyway, so that's the kind of conclusions that in the early days of big data have sometimes been drawn, and it tells you we have to be cautious, right? I mean, obviously we're now much more advanced, and big data is doing a much better job, but bad things have happened, and you could make a lot of money with it, and it should be concerning for us. All right, and then there were some stunning failures, and basically Watson Health once praised as a revolution in medicine was failing on the parts. And then regarding Dr. Google, people were also warning it's perhaps not as good as it should be yet. It may have changed in the meantime, or may change in the future, but we'll have to keep an eye on this. Another success story of the early days of big data was Google's food trends. Okay, and so basically using searches of people, it would be possible to nowcast the food and even do a short-term forecast. So that was big progress as compared to previously when hospitals had to report how many people were in the hospital. And then it suddenly failed. Scientists have questioned it, and it ended with Google shutting the service down. Was that bad? Right? It's not the only failure to report. There was also 23andMe. So you could send in your gene data, would get back a report, and then this health authority actually wanted to stop those genetic tests. Such a thing doesn't happen very often in the United States. And why is this? Basically, if you would send your genetic code to some other company to analyze it, you get an overlapping report, but some claimed facts would be different. And you don't want to have this when this is about the question how long you're going to live or what you're being to, what you will be dying of, right? So you don't want to be scared if the things that the report claims won't happen. And in the meantime, it's bankrupt, this company. And we had also early on applications of genetic testing. And one famous case, and personally I think it's a pretty shocking case, is related to Angelina Jolie, you know, as from many movies. And she said, knowledge is power. You remember that phrase that I've used before? So it just, you should know about your health, you know, then you can do something about it. That's what she claimed. And she also said, I have a faulty gene, and that could cause cancer. In that case, breast cancer, and she was so much scared about it, she wanted to make sure this could never happen. So, trigger warning, she basically had her breast removed. And that's not only her own decision, and perhaps it was right or potentially right. It's hard to say was it necessary, was it reasonable. But the point is, it was kind of marketed as a new business. You know, like every woman now should basically make a genetic test to figure out whether you have a faulty gene. In that case, make an expensive operation. And perhaps that's not the conclusion that we should draw because there's lots of false positives. Whenever you make measurement, there can be false positives and false negatives. We should never forget about it. And there are some examples where, according to genetic tests, people should be really in bad health condition, but they're doing pretty well. No, so a body is a complex system that sometimes It's hard to understand and manages to find solutions to problems we don't even understand. So it's perhaps not a good advantage for every woman to do this. And the issue is, among others, black box algorithms, right? So, of course, there was the idea that we could basically make the scientific process more effective, cheaper, faster. And so this is the old science-driven approach. You do experiments, measurements, observations, and you try to develop a theory or model the system in a computer, simulate it. Then you have to calibrate the model, and you pick the parameters, and you have to validate it. And once you've done all this, you can start thinking about applications. Okay. And now with big data, people thought, oh, we could simplify that. Yeah, just we collect lots of data, and then we have AI figure out what's going on, and then it implicitly fits the data, and then we apply it. And that's what people have done for some time, and perhaps many are still doing. Scientists, of course, are not micro-cautious about. So, importantly, we really need to distinguish between calibration and validation. So, calibration is about fitting parameters to a given data set, and let's do the test, okay? So, what we do here is we create a parabola to the power 2 plus noise. And so we get a sample data set like this, and then we're trying to fit this data set, okay? And now the question is, if I try to fit this data set with polynomials of 2, degree 8, and degree 15, which polynomial would be delivering the best fit? Please raise your hands. Degree 2, degree 8, degree 15. Okay, that's the majority of people, and I check here we see the errors. 13 for degree 2, 11 for degree 8, and 10 for degree 15. Congratulations. But now, this was just a random sample, right? Let's basically produce again another random sample of the same function, okay? And then the question is, which will be the best fit? Please raise your hands. Degree 2, degree 8, degree 15. Okay, so I knew you're smart. So polynomial degree 2. Error is 14 because this time we did not fit to this data set, but to a similar sample. Okay, more error than before, makes sense. Now degree 8, error 53. And a polynomial of degree 15, 75,980. Jesus. So if you don't do validation, then things can really go terribly wrong. And we have a nice word for this. No? It's called hallucinations. But in fact, it's deep fake. And the issue really is it's very difficult to tell apart whether we have a good model, a digital twin, a kind of reproducing reality identically, or we have a deep fake that we would perhaps recognize only when it's too late, when the accident happened. This is a really big problem, and when the godfather of AI figured that out, he left Google and he started warning the world. I think it's quite reasonable to do so because now we have big AI models, huge ones, giant ones that really influence planet Earth, including your house, as I will show you later. So what I want to say is we need understandable tools, we need explainable results, and rather than just big data analytics, we need data science. So we should not just ignore about domain knowledge. We should not ignore about statistics, statistical significance. We should not ignore many other things, including complexity, as I'll show. And here's a data science example. So I was telling you Google Zoom transfer is going down, but we were doing something else. So we were using even not so big data sets in order to predict the spreading of the flu. And if you look into data, spatial temporal occurrences of the flu, then you get this. See widely scattered data, uh, very messy, not very predictive at all. And the question is, why is this? And it's because you've been taking a plane. And many of pills too. So kind of air traffic really messes up the possibility makes sense of disease spread, you would think. But you could also use this fact in order to come up with a better model. So what we did basically is we used passenger data of air travel in order to define a new effective distance between airports. And based on this, basically Frankfurt and New York Manhattan would be very close to each other because there are many people traveling between those cities, even though the geographic distance is large. But considering this new effective distance, it would be possible to understand suddenly the spreading of a disease, and now things get predictive. Okay? So this is the value of science. If you understand why diseases spread, it's contact dynamics in a sense, then you can come up with model-based data analysis on let's data science. And in fact, data science can do things better in many ways. I will not go through all this. Mention perhaps overfitting, sensitivity, statistical significance. Just to mention a few points. We'll get the slide later on. So I believe not in data analytics, data-driven, but in data science. Okay, so now we still need scientists in this, I think, but not everyone agrees. And some people think it's good enough to make billions, and why should we care of doing the right thing? Okay, so but data science, we need to be aware of this is still a reductionistic approach, and there are complex systems. And there are many reasons why black box modeling is not good enough, and in particular, there's deterministic chaos, there are turbulence, there are butterfly effects, to mention just a few interesting things. And here is an interesting challenge. Game of life. Everyone knows it. Three simple rules. This is all Commenton produces sometimes non-repetitive dynamics. And so we can use it to generate data and then have a machine learning model learn these dynamics. Can use 1,000 parameters, can use 1,000,000 parameters, a billion, a trillion, whatever you like, and it will approximate these dynamics, but it will not come up with the three simple rules unless we really help it to look at the data in a very particular. So it's easy to generate this data. It's very difficult to make sense of them. Okay, and this brings us to complex dynamical systems, and those have really some interesting features. So there can be emergence of unplanned order, such as these lanes of uniform walking direction that form spontaneously to make the flow efficient. There can be unintended self-organized patterns, such as this phantom traffic jam, the stop-and-go traffic that nobody wants, and still it happens because of systemic instability. So there's an illusion of control. Think you are in control, but in fact, if you interact with many other people, you may lose control. And there are many examples of complex systems. So turbulent fluids, traffic flows, large supply chains, social, political, economic, and ecological systems, financial markets, group dynamics, crowd behavior. They're all around us, so we cannot just ignore complex dynamical systems if we want to do responsible innovation. Our brain, our immune system, ecosystems, and societies are all complex dynamical self-organizing systems. And I would say very nice ones, We're very happy about them all together. So complexity is not a bad thing. No, it does a good job in many cases. Living systems, a wonderful life are all based on self-realization. It's like magic. Really nice. Well, there are limits of predictability. We know it from weather forecasts. And even if you would have 1,000 times more data or 1,000,000 times more data, you could not predict the weather, say, in Zurich in 100 years from now on Sunday afternoon of a certain day. And why is that? Why am I so confident? Because we understand the physics of it. And there's turbulence, and turbulence means like very small changes in the conditions could really imply large differences eventually after some time. And there are other similarly behaving systems such as deterministic chaos, and here's an example, the Lorentz factor, where we can really see this. So suppose you really start in the very close neighborhood of some other trajectory. For some time, it would behave similarly, but eventually those two trajectories would behave very differently. That's called the butterfly effect. Okay? Hard to imagine that the flapping of the wings of a butterfly could change the weather in 3 months from now, but mathematically speaking, it's true. And then we wish to control those systems, and here we have a low-coupled terror system, predator-prey equations for a very simple ecological system. You see oscillations. Let's say there's a hunter who wants to stabilize the system at this point over here, right? And interferes with the system to get there. And instead, we're ending up over there, somewhere very different. Now, suppose you want to control the world, kind of thousands, billions, trillions of parameters, and now how much could you mess up potentially the system? And then open up the newspaper and understand what's going on. Okay? Now, it's true that with more data, we've ended up in a time where you can do evidence-based decision making, but data volume increases faster than processing power, and therefore this creates something which we could call dark data. I mean, data that will never be processed, and we don't know whether that data is meaningful or not, right? So we may overlook important things. So in fact, the percentage of dark data is growing. That's bad news. Our visibility gets worse in a sense. We don't know what data to look at. The other thing is we go on networking the world, and as a result, see the red line over here, systemic complexity explodes even faster than data volume. So paradoxically, even though we have more data than ever, and the best technology ever, we're losing control as we're trying to control the world in a top-down way. We need a new control approach, actually distributed control, bottom-up self-organization. Take a network, you have an intended effect on somebody, but that person, for example, is connected with many other persons, so it has an impact on other people. So there will be side effects, there can be feedback effects, there could be cascading effects, right? And so a little change in such a highly network system could really eventually mess up the entire world. As it has actually happened in something of the financial crisis. Because of the things and so the problem is still around. So this shows the effectiveness of centralized top-down control, and we need a change in perspective. Complex dynamical systems tend to self-organize and to do what they want, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing because by establishing suitable interactions, we can actually get desirable outcomes for free. Kind of, the system will do it for us. I'll just show you an example. Okay, so here we are simulating the Stockholm code traffic we've seen before in the experiment. Very annoying phenomenon, everyone knows it. And eventually we'll get annoyed. We'll get out of the car, take a helicopter or drone in order to see what is actually the problem. And what we'll see is there's an on-ramp. And there are cars that try to get on the freeway through that on-ramp. That produces, let's see through here, that produces small disruptions in the flow. Those small disruptions will amplify the cause of stop and go traffic we want to get rid of. How do we do this? We have implemented a traffic assistance system where cars measure distances and relative velocities and automatically respond to the car ahead a little bit differently from what human drivers would do. And as you can see, the traffic jam disappears even though the inflow stays the same. Notably, this works even if not every car is equipped with that technology, like 40% could be enough. We don't need to have a traffic control center that controls every single car. We just need to change the interactions between the cars by real-time measurements and real-time feedbacks. And basically, the Internet of Things allows us to do this and basically make the invisible hand work that Adam Smith was talking about, make it work 300 years later. We have the technology for this now. And the issue is mechanism design, so we need to figure out what kind of interactions do we need so the system does a favorable thing by itself. Okay? And so this is digitally assisted optimization. And besides traffic, we could also look into logistics. Okay? And then back to health. There are some people saying planetary health is actually a giant logistics problem. Okay? Here is a paper that makes exactly this point, kind of planetary health, global resources, the cross-cutting challenge of all, kind of the super challenge. Kind of there's nothing more important than that, they claim. Okay? And that's not the first paper about planetary health. One of the early ones is this one. This has been promoted by the Rockefeller Lancet Commission. And planetary health refers to the health not only to you and me or an entire population, but to the health of human civilization and the state of the natural system on which it depends. It means the health of everything, including civilization. So basically, if you want to fix it, you need to fix civilization. You need to interfere with your thinking, feeling, and acting. Okay? So if you want to have planetary health, kind of that's the conclusion. We need to have a totalitarian system that basically talks to your cells to fix them before they can catch a disease. Do you get the point where this is heading? Okay? No question, our current system is a problem. It's unsustainable. Things can't stay this way. But what is the proposed solution? Proposed by some people, not my solution in that way, kind of an operating system for the planet, centralized, right? So Not an operating system for your smartphone or for your computer, an operating system for planet Earth, including you. Do you get the point? Okay, so these are all surveillance-based data-driven AI-controlled cybernetic society concepts, and we could spend hours on this. So we're focusing on this, Century House, Neurocapitalism, Internet of Bodies, Society 5.0. Okay, really read about it if you want to understand where we are heading. So in this planetary health approach, health basically replaces God. It takes decisions about life and death as well. You also have to consider this. And I'm very critical about it. I've written this blog, so if you're interested, have a look at this. Of course, in the beginning, those documents read reasonably. Now, like an advertisement comes across very nice. It not you think, yes, we want this. But if you think about it for some time, you suddenly see what's really behind it, and that this is evil wrapped in good and nice words. And it would basically end like this. Essentially, the end game, this is from a document, is to come up, end game, is to come up with a model designed for patients. Everyone is a patient, all of us. That is fine-tuned to recognize evolving patterns of intersecting clinical, behavioral, mental, environmental, and genetic information. I mean, everything is claimed by them to be needed in order to allow them to fix this world, including you and your behavior and thinking. You're the problem. And you're not being asked here how we go about that problem. So big corporations want to determine our public and private lives and our health and mental health ever more, including what we do, think, and feel, and including our intimate sphere. And that is fascist. Quote Benito Mussolini, fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism. Of course, it is a merger of state and corporate power. And so if that merger happens, we should start to get concerned. And in fact, when you think about mental health, this is a graphic distributed by Global Economic Forum, and then it also means continuous monitoring of your mental health. Who would do it and how would they do it? And that brings us to technology contributions, okay? So, technology gets faster, more powerful, smaller. So basically different kinds of technology are being fused. I don't read it all, you can do that yourself. So race computing, we have that. And so information communication technology fuses with AI and eventually also neuroscience, cognitive science. Now it gets interesting. And so we end up with basically everything is connected with everything else, and digital technology is going to be used to control it all. Down to the N is nano scale. Nano is so small you can't even see it with your eye. Much smaller than the size diameter of a hair. Okay. So in-body surveillance is next. Actually, it's here. Tracking how our bodies work could change our lives. They said back in 2020, and the Internet of Bodies is here. They said 2020. Now we have 25. Okay. And how is this really possible? I couldn't believe that for a long time, to be honest. I really had to read and find literature, scientific literature for 6 months or so until I started to realize what is going on here. So they're working on an internet of nano things, or actually bio nano things and wireless body area networks. Okay. And so the point is, we could put, for somebody, nanoparticles, because it is a small, into our bodies, and that could be done through food, drinks, air, medicine, whatever. And people cannot defend themselves effectively against that. And then once the nanoparticles are there, we can basically scatter energy beams. It's a physical principle. Scatter those beams in order to measure what's going on in that body. Kind of genius idea in a sense. But as a political system, it could end really horribly. Okay? So they did not think it was necessary to tell us that this is going on. And you can also do fascinating things. For example, you can create a digital ID based on nanotechnology, right? You can, for example, yeah, your body would be the password. Your body would also be the passport. And your body would be basically the access code to your bank account. It's all possible, technologically fascinating. But is it a utopia or a dystopia? You decide. Okay. And this is not all. Now it gets really interesting. Brain Initiative mission back in 2013. Barack Obama, rarely talked about science or health, but this time he did. He said, we'll spend $3 billion on the Brain Initiative that seeks to deepen understanding of the inner workings of the human mind and to improve how we treat, prevent, and cure disorders of the brain, including, by the way, behavioral disorders, right? Okay, so in fact, there are nano tools for neuroscience and brain activity mapping. And that also back in 2013, that was the year when Edward Snowden was alerting us of internet surveillance. They were already preparing for human brain indexing. So basically, rather than every 12 months, as it used to be at that time, data volume would double every 12 hours, right? This is needed for human brain indexing. There are applications about human brain cloud interface. This is a newspaper article telling us brain reading is coming. That was back in 2019. And one thing you should also know about is optogenetics. And optogenetics does research on ways how genetically modified nerve cells could be triggered by light impulses rather than electricity, right? So if you put the right particles into our cells, you could basically trigger those nerve cells from the outside. That's interesting, okay? And actually, Nature has this kind of publication back in 2022. What the Nature was capable of at that time, we don't exactly know. But we're talking about wireless optogenetic neural dust for deep brain stimulation, okay? Your brain. And then it said, Elon Musk's Neuralink is being outperformed by the Spanish graphene startup. So this is a startup that does not want to implant hardware into human brains, but it basically uses nanoparticles to do the same job. And we know that DARPA has spent millions on injectable brain control technology, right? And then there is this official document by the Ministry of Defense together with the Bundeswehr in Germany. And he said, it could be argued, that was back in May 2021, it could be argued that treatments involving novel vaccination processes and gene and cell therapies are examples of human augmentation already in the pipeline. The pipeline was back in 2021. And then have a look at this cover page of The Economist. in the beginning of the year 2024, that was last year. And what does it show? Over here, magnified, you can see it's all seeing eye, brains connected to the computer. So, how do you like it? How do you feel? Um, welcome to the brave new world, I would say. Of course, there are dangers. Could basically weave the thinking of capitalism into every single thought that we have, you know. So it's not enough for them anymore to have surveillance capitalism where they know what you're doing. They want to be able to shape your thinking, feeling, and behavior. And military wants that too. And so there's some scientific books about this discussing the issue of military neuroscience and mind wars and fifth generation warfare. Cognitive warfare is now part of international warfare, of the information warfare we're in. So your mind is the battlefield. You are being used as a military asset to convince your friends, colleagues, and family members of whatever they want you to convince them of. So, are we seeing a militarization of bodies and minds? I've been warning of this. In fact, back in 2000, the year 2000, in fact, there was a projection of warfare would be looking like in 2025. It's now. And see what one of the slides said. So there were different civilization periods, hunter-gatherer society, agricultural society, industrial society. So you think we're here, okay? But in fact, we're most likely here. And it says, who is affected by that kind of warfare? Everyone. How does it work? What are the weapons? IT, bio, bots. Okay? So, future health. This is actually something like a perspective paper, something where they said what they wanted to be doing, future healthcare, deep data, smart sensors, virtual patients, and the internet of humans, called internet of bodies. So, do you recognize something? What does this logo remind you of? Any idea? Okay, and there again articles about this from human body digitization to internet of bodies towards new dimension of military operations. And here has been a panel discussion about hyper personalization of warfare, and it's already ongoing, right? So if they've been creating something like the sentient world simulation, a digital twin of the world, including everyone in a personalized way using mass surveillance data in order to know what's going to happen, to know how they could shape what's going to happen, know how to deploy effective psychological operations, how to prepare for effective war. This now is being fed not only by internet surveillance, but also potentially being fed now with body data. Okay? And the main goal is still to fix the world, see how it's doing. Get back to a concrete example. So a couple of years back, it was in 2018, one of my postdocs told me he was talking to a big IT company, really big, about a joint project. And I got a little bit angry about this and see what they said. The likely reason for the obesity epidemics, as some people call it, may be as simple as this. Instead of sugar, to which our body is used, modern food industry uses cheaper corn syrup, if I'm well informed, which is less sweet, so a larger dose is being used to make it taste as sweet as sugar, but this has more calories. So they're misleading the senses of people by cheap food ingredients, and afterwards they're blaming people for getting fat. How bad is this? And then, of course, it needs a new technology to fix it. Okay, and one of these technologies is nudging. And I'm not entirely sure what exactly they had in mind, how they wanted to stop people drinking unhealthy soft drinks that there's a lot of advertisement for to make them drink it, even though it's unhealthy. But there's this technology. It's called Pavlok, okay, and it would give you an electrical shock, okay, so you don't do the wrong thing. You can buy it, we can get it for free, most likely. But this is nothing else than conditioning people like animals. This is how we've been treated. It's really downgrading people's autonomy, people's dignity, people's sovereignty. And here's another example that I'm getting increasingly worried about. Planetary health diet is a spin-off of that planetary health concept. So the idea is that we could change our way of eating in such a way that it would reduce CO2 emissions, carbon emissions, okay? That in itself is not necessarily a bad idea. Makes sense, seems. And so basically what we would do is replace beef by lamb. That will reduce CO2 emissions. Lamb by pork, pork by chicken, chicken by insects. Okay. And see, but don't worry, insects by natural fruits and plants, and natural products by chemistry. Because according to this approach, it actually just matters what ingredients you eat and how many calories and what kind of ingredients you take up in your body. Okay? So it becomes a chemical logistics problem, nothing else. And basically, yes, have a look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And so if they want to make the world more efficient, basically by pushing things down, us down to the very thing that's needed to survive, right? Kind of all the nutrients that we need to live. But this is not what we call living, it's more vegetating, kind of the sheer physical existence, right? So what gets lost, besides the material needs, kind of love, human dignity, and bliss, basically those things that we're striving for, really, you know, I think most people would not be satisfied to see this as a really living goal of existence. So the planetary health approach seems to be very materialistic in nature. Everything is focused on ingredients. Interaction effects are underappreciated, but in complex systems, this is all what matters, really. So we had actually one staff member been working some time also for the military, and one day he came up with this proposal: could we have a food printer? And these kind of printers are being produced. So basically, rather than we dining and getting this delicious Italian food that we're having these days, you push a button and will get something from a food printer. How much do you like that? Who likes this idea? No. Just for the sake of sustainability of the planet, who is willing to do this? Come on. Okay, so here we printed artificial eggs. But now, who's eating veggie meat? Nobody? Come on, let's be honest. I mean, I think quite a few people who are now eating veggie meat, right? It's being presented as more healthy, but is it really? People who know about quality of food are concerned, because it's really just about ingredients, and they would contain ingredients that would make you like this food. I mean, lots of salt, lots of fat, lots of stuff that's actually not so healthy. So it's probably not more healthy. So it's being sold as a health revolution, but in fact, like with the soft drink, perhaps we should start to get concerned about this so-called solution. So what I'm trying to say is, coming to an end now, we need to get back control over our own lives. And if you want to get back control, you need to get control of your digital twins that are being used in order to figure out how to most effectively manipulate your life. And it's a lot more effective than you would ever think. In many cases, you would not even notice you've been manipulated. So if you're not in control of the data, you're just a number for them. You're being manipulated in a computer, and then they're trying to implement it in reality. And I think, no, this is not what we should be doing. It's not compatible with human dignity, which is part of the United Nations Universal Charter of Human Rights. And most democratic constitutions is really the fundamental principle. It would not be compatible with human dignity if the state could claim the right to forcibly register and catalog people in their entire personality. And also, actually, politics is responsible and the law system to defend your human dignity against third parties, be it in your own country or elsewhere. Are they doing it? I have some doubts here. And so I think if you really want to live in a better future, and your kids and your grandchildren and people in 1,000 years from now, fix this issue. This is the number one priority to get back control over our lives, get informational self-determination, demand it, make sure you'll have it, and contribute to a better future. Change is coming. You can contribute to it. We can live in a new civilization, a better civilization. What can you do? Apply this value-sensitive design approach. I mean, create algorithms that have basically the constitutional values built in, okay? And also the cultural values. Build democracy by design, invent tech that protects human rights and our environment to create freedom tech, and replace this idea of the benevolent dictator that I've presented in context of the planetary health approach, replace that idea by assisted self-organization, co-evolution, and boosting surrogate. If you do that, it would make me very happy. Thank you so much. All right. Questions? Comments? This is ready for Pranita, I'm afraid. So, yes.
Dirk, I just want to say thank you. I mean, that's a great and a very important talk. I'm really glad that you have raised economic, political issues of power that are always embedded in all of the work that all of us do. Sometimes it's not so apparent or obvious, but I really appreciate the way that you drew out all of those dimensions from a very scientific perspective. So really, I'm looking forward to more of that, and I'm hoping that we'll see some of that. I know that every student has their own research object and their own research questions, but I think as you brought it together at the end, we can all benefit. And in fact, we really need to take this position on board in a serious way. So thank you.